All right, good morning, guys. So I'm going to be wearing the same clothes all week because I'm really videoing these all in the same day. But we're going to pretend today that I'm videoing on Tuesday. This is going to be Tuesday's Bible lesson. Um, let's do the memory verse first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we talked about yesterday in Bible. Okay? So remember, we're doing the X verse. You can say it with me. Hopefully, you're starting to learn it. X, exceeding great and precious promises are given unto us. 2 Peter 1:4. X, exceeding great and precious promises are given unto us. 2 Peter 1:4. And remember, what that means is that God has promised his people wonderful things, to love us, to take care of us, to never leave us, to comfort us when things are hard. There are just some things that when you follow Jesus, there are promises made to you that are different than those that don't follow Jesus. Because once you're a child of God, he takes care of you like a father. He is your father. He's your heavenly father. So the Bible in that verse is saying that there are such great promises that the Lord promises to those who love him and follow him. Okay, yesterday we talked about the crucifixion of Jesus. We went through some kind of difficult material, and we basically talked about how Jesus was perfect and without sin. And in any moment, he could have decided not to die on the cross. He could have taken himself off of the cross. He could have stopped the pain and the hurt and the sadness at any moment. If you remember, there were people that were making fun of him, lots of people making fun of Jesus, saying, if you're really Jesus, and you've done all these miracles, why can't you just save yourself now? And we talked about he could have, but he knew that dying on the cross was the only way that we could be forgiven for our sins. And so he chose to stay there. And it was very sad. But I want you to know that what happened to Jesus doesn't end there. Today we'll talk about what happened after Jesus died on the cross. So we have a lot to cover today. So I tried to switch the camera where hopefully you can see a little bit more of the picture, and I'll kind of move it out of the way a little bit just so my face isn't blocked the whole time. But we're going to start, if you remember yesterday, he's a centurion or a Roman soldier. In the middle here is Jesus on the cross, and then to each side of Jesus are the thieves. Remember that we talked about one was making fun of Jesus, and the other one realized and believed in his heart that Jesus was the promised Messiah. And so he asked Jesus to forgive him of his sins. And he put his trust and faith in Jesus. And Jesus told him right there on the cross that he forgave him, and that day when the thief died, that he would be with Jesus in paradise, in heaven. And so this was, we talked about how this thief was a really not a good guy, and he'd made a lot of really bad choices. But before he died, he asked for forgiveness and truly meant it in his heart and was truly sad for the things that he had done. And Jesus gave him forgiveness. And he, in that moment, was saved from his sins. And when he died and went to heaven. Okay, so we're going to pick up right here. It was a very sad day when Jesus died on Calvary. His followers stood in the distance and watched with heavy hearts and thought that they would never see their master again. One secret follower of Jesus, his name was Joseph of Arimathea, came forward and boldly asked Pilate if he might take the body of Jesus and give it a proper burial. So this is after Jesus had died. This man came forward, and he boldly goes to Pontius Pilate, and he asks him if he can have the body of Jesus so that he could prepare it for a proper burial. And Pilate grants it to him and says, yes, you can. And so Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus take Jesus' body down from the cross, and they prepare it for burial. And how they did that back then was different than how we do it today. They took a long piece of white linen, that's a type of cloth, and they wrapped it around Jesus' body. And in the folds of the linen, they poured an ointment made of precious spices over the face of Jesus. and they placed in a linen napkin. So back then, you know, in order to preserve the body, in order to keep it, you know, from smelling bad, as a sign of respect, they would wrap the body in linen, and then they would put these special spices, sort of like an ointment, like a perfume, on the body to, you know, to make it smell good. And so that's what they were doing with Jesus here. So let me show you a picture real quick. Okay, here is Jesus's body. They've wrapped him in this white linen. And then over here you see where they've mixed together the ointment, and they're putting that in the linen over Jesus's body. And again, this was a sign of great respect as well, that they loved Jesus, these men loved Jesus, and they wanted to take care of his body. So I'll let you look at that for just a second. All right, then they carried the body to a nearby tomb or a garden and put it into Joseph's new tomb. So Joseph, this man Joseph of Arimathea, he had a tomb. Jesus didn't have anywhere to be buried, and so he took Jesus's body and he placed it in his own tomb. Then this was a tomb that Joseph had prepared for himself and his family's future burial when they died. Some of the women who had been at the crucifixion followed Joseph and Nicodemus to the tomb, and there they saw where the body of Jesus was laid. They watched as the men rolled a very heavy stone in the front of the entrance to the tomb. So this tomb is kind of like, picture maybe like a small cave, and it has a big hole, you know, because it didn't have a door. It's like a cave, and it has this big hole in front of it so that people could get in and out. Well, so what they did was they carved out a big, huge piece of stone or rock, and they would roll it in front of the tomb to seal it off as like a door. So let's see, some of the women, okay, they'd watch the men roll a very heavy stone in front of the entrance to the tomb. So let's see, I should have a picture of that. Let's take a look at that. Right here, so you see this kind of, this tomb kind of looks like a cave. Here is the big stone, or it's like a huge rock, or you might kind of think of it as like a big piece of cement that was cut out, that was rolled over as a door to the tomb. And here are the Roman soldiers, and I'll show you that picture again in a second. The next day, the religious leaders went to Pilate, and they remembered something that Jesus' followers had forgotten. So this is what the soldiers were telling Pontius Pilate. Sir, we remember that the deceiver, because remember they thought Jesus was a liar. They're talking about Jesus here. They're telling Pontius Pilate, we remember that the deceiver, Jesus, said that while he was yet alive, after 3 days that he would rise again. Let us set watch over the tomb so that no one can steal his body away and say that he has risen from the dead. Pilate gave them permission to seal the tomb or close it up, and Roman soldiers were to set guard around the tomb. So that's what you see here. So basically, these soldiers went and told Pontius Pilate, we remember Jesus said that after 3 days, he would rise again or come back from the dead. Well, so what the soldiers said was, well, we don't want somebody coming to steal his body and pretending that Jesus rose from the dead and making people believe that. That's just nonsense. So Pontius Pilate gave them permission to seal off or to close off the tomb, not only to close it off where nobody could get in and get Jesus, but also he placed guards around the tomb to make sure that nobody could get in. All right? Very early on Sunday morning, there was a great earthquake in the garden. Remember, the garden is where the tomb is. And an angel rolled the stone away from the tomb. The soldiers were so afraid that they fainted. Jesus arose from the dead, just like he said he would. And his body came out of the tomb alive, just like he said it would. The soldiers later awoke and ran back to tell the religious leaders. But the religious leaders had bribed them to tell other people a lie, that Jesus had not risen from the dead, but that the disciples had come in while soldiers were asleep and stolen the body to make it look like Jesus had risen. But we know that that's a lie. Jesus really did rise from the dead. And I'll give you some evidence or a way to prove that here in just a little bit when we get further into the story, okay? But let me show you a picture of that. So here is the tomb. Here's Jesus coming out of the tomb. These two men are not asleep. They have fainted because they're afraid. Because they saw the angel of the Lord and it made them afraid and they fainted or passed out. You see these soldiers? Okay, so let's see what happens next. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome had left their homes while it was yet dark to come to the tomb. They didn't know all this had happened yet. As they walked, the day broke and they saw the sun come up. It was light as they arrived at the tomb, so it was morning time when they got there. They brought precious spices to anoint the dead body of Jesus. Today we bring flowers to gravesides, but in those days they brought very expensive spices to help preserve the body. So that's what these women were coming to the grave to do. And they asked, who's going to roll away the stone for us? Because that stone was very, very heavy, and those women could not do it by themselves. So they said, who will roll the stone away for us? But when they got to the tomb, they saw that the huge stone was already rolled away. Mary Magdalene ran back quickly to tell the disciples the sad news that someone had rolled away the stone and had stolen the body of Jesus. The other women stayed. As they looked closely, they saw something that filled them with wonder. An angel was sitting on the stone door of the tomb. See, first they thought that somebody had rolled the stone away and gone in and stolen Jesus' body. But the women that stayed behind looked up and they saw an angel sitting on the stone door. The women were very afraid, but the angel said, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He has risen. Come see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead." And so with fear and great joy, the women left quickly and ran back toward the city to tell the disciples. What a cool thing, and probably, obviously, very scary thing it would have been for them to see. But they were filled with so much joy because, they had been sad that they thought that they had lost Jesus forever. They still did not understand that Jesus was going to return. He had been trying to tell them that, but they didn't get it. And now they come to the tomb sad, going to put spices on his body, and there's an angel of the Lord there, and the angel said, "He is not here. He is risen. Go tell the disciples the news." So that's what the women did. Meanwhile, while this was happening, Peter and John, probably warned by Mary Magdalene that someone had stolen Christ's body, ran to the tomb. So they ran to the tomb thinking that Jesus' body had been stolen also. John, being the younger and able to run faster, got there first and looked into the tomb, but didn't go in. Later, Peter also came running, and when he got there, he ran inside the tomb. John followed. What do you suppose they saw? What do you think they saw? They saw the long linen cloth that was wrapped around Jesus' body, but it didn't have Jesus' body in it. And the napkin was folded neatly and laid to one side. Jesus had gotten right up out of the grave clothes and left the tomb. The grave clothes were empty. Jesus was not there. Where was the body? John saw the empty grave clothes and believed that Jesus had indeed risen from the dead. Peter and John went back to Jerusalem to tell the others what they had seen. John filled with faith that Jesus was alive, and Peter filled with wonder, but not sure that Christ was alive. So think about, at this point now, you've got guards that have seen this happen, seen Jesus rise from the dead. You've got the women who came to the grave to put the spices on Jesus' body. They saw the angel of the Lord and were told that Jesus had risen. Now you see two of Jesus' disciples go into the graveside, and they see that, or into the tomb, and they see that Jesus' body is not there. and his clothes are neatly, his burial clothes, that linen that we talked about, is neatly folded up, and just laying there. And so we'll pick up tomorrow with kind of what's really cool, what happens next. Okay? All right. Bye, guys.